first you're just like all just strangers, and you're like, how's this gonna work out? I don't know any of these people.
De que hay algo mucho más allá que la televisión, que el cine, que el celular, y eso lo encontramos en las relaciones humanas.
A la mesa de la creación, cada cual. Entonces, ¿qué significa la vida?
¿Qué significa la vida?
Eso es todo.
La vida.
Eso no es toda la vida.
You really get to know people, especially when you're experiencing so much. Being integrated in a community, building relationships, that was what I was really most excited about.
Pues yo les digo, ante los ojos de Dios todos somos hermanos, todos somos iguales y nosotros somos familias muy sencillas, no somos estudiados, preparados, pero tenemos mucho amor para darles y pues ellos solo tienen que abrir su corazón y recibir nuestro amor.
You know, what you're doing in the communities and with the Salvadorans, you bring that into your academics.
Seeing numbers as real people, rather than just learning about all these situations in political science or religious studies, just really like feeling that deep down.
Reading about this history that you're also becoming people who live it.
Cuando digo Monseñor Romero, pienso en los niños que asesinaron, por ejemplo, en mi comunidad.
Hermanos, son de nuestro mismo pueblo, matan a sus mismos hermanos campesinos.
Lo que predico siempre, que esta es la evidencia de lo que estoy diciendo, la injusticia social.
People just do so much, like throughout their entire histories, their families' histories, but they have so much life to give you, and you're like, how are you giving me so much? And it's like a beautiful thing. You can't really put it into words, you just feel it, like it's a feeling.
And you come home at the end of a praxis day, the end of a day in a community, and you are so full of laughter and of challenge and of sadness. It's almost like you can't not share it with those people around you. And the fact that they're so willing to listen and be there with you in it, it creates this really transformative space. The pillar of spirituality became more for me about asking those questions together. What are these sort of fundamental experiences of beauty? And what do they say about how we're supposed to live our lives and how we're supposed to respond to them?
You feel why there's so much spirituality to it, because people in El Salvador are very spiritual, and it's not a spirituality I had ever experienced. It's like God is everywhere. That connection, where you kind of forget that distance between you and another person, where it kind of just feels like, you know, there's not much distance. Maybe we share a lot. Just really feeling happy about just being alive. And that's spirituality. I kind of forgot that, or never was able to really feel that for my whole life until I was in El Salvador. Everything flows from that in my life now. Because it's natural. You feel really connected to everything. You just feel small but big at the same time.
To ask me what the Casa experience means for me now is to ask, what has it been like to live your life with two legs?
It's amazing right now.
I think more than anything, it's taught me how to see.
Alright, so welcome everybody. That was just a quick video about our Casa program in El Salvador. If anyone is interested in learning more about that, we have that video as well as more details about the program on our website. Currently, applications are open for fall, so if anyone wants to learn more about that, we can definitely talk about that. So hopefully you're all here for the Study Abroad 101 session. No one's wandered into the wrong place. So it looks like we're a small group, which is totally fine because that also means that we'll have more time if anyone has specific questions at the end. So that being said, I will get started and introduce myself. My name is Sarah Brinley. I'm the Assistant Director here of Study Abroad, and I also have one of our return students. So you know we don't lose people; they come back. If you want to stand up and give yourself a quick introduction, he will be here to help kind of answer some questions along the way.
Yeah, so I'm Tyler. I'm a communication major, and I'm a senior, and I went to London last fall through the FIE program.
Cool. So I'll tag you in as we go along the way to just kind of maybe give some of your either details about your program or opinions on some of the stuff we talked about, if that works for you. Okay. So for those of you who haven't been in to see us yet, we are located in Varsity Hall. We are part of the global engagement team here on Santa Clara's campus. And so that involves the study abroad side. So all of the students here that are going outside into the world, as well as our international students and scholar services, which is for everybody, including other study abroad students who are coming actually to visit here or study here at Santa Clara. Today we are going to talk about the basics of study abroad. We'll cover sort of the initial questions that you're probably asking yourself. So are you eligible? So what are those basic eligibility requirements to even get started out of the gate? We're going to look at the types of programs because not all study abroad is created equal. There's lots of different types of opportunities that look different. So some might match your goals and your interests differently. We'll touch on a couple of first and second year programs to get an idea of what sort of class level is everybody at. So are you all sophomores? Are you junior? Okay, totally fine. So first and second year programs, maybe not of our interest, so we can always skip over that. And then we'll talk about why studying abroad. I assume you're all at least interested in studying abroad, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Some of you might be on the fence, and so you're not exactly sure. So we'll talk a little bit about what motivates our students to study abroad. And then we'll also help you get connected with return students. I'm sure most of you know someone who has gone on a study abroad program in the past, and they're great resources because they can tell you from personal experience a lot more probably about what their process was like as a student than I would necessarily be able to do. And so having that other perspective is really useful. And there are students who have gone on pretty much every program that we have. So if there's if a program that you're interested in, we can help you get connected. So we'll talk about that. Finally, we'll dig into the actual application process, which hopefully is on everyone's forefront of their mind if they're planning to apply for what will be a fall of next year. It happens faster than you think, like most things in fall quarter, and so it's important that we get you started on that. We'll cover even the rubric and the deadlines. The deadline, as we'll see, looks a little bit different this year. So if you have had friends in the past, or you yourself have even applied in the past, for different terms along the way. It's going to look a little bit different this year, and I'll kind of explain why and how and all that stuff. And then finally, I just want to share some additional upcoming events. Fall quarter is a busy time, I know, for everybody, but this is our main time to kind of get you information and get you going in the process for study abroad. So we have a couple of other events along the way that if you can make it, I definitely encourage you to go to. All right. So first things first is, can you go? The eligibility criteria will vary from program to program, but across the board, there are basic eligibility requirements that we expect students to complete. So you're going to be applying to one program per term. So if you are, say, kind of on the fence between two fall programs, you're going to have to work with us to narrow down and decide on one. We don't allow multiple applications per term. That being said, if you're interested in what would be fall and spring, or maybe fall and summer, that's fine instead, okay, because you're not going during the same term, and that does happen. Most students are applying for what would be fall of maybe their junior year or senior year, but there are some really adventurous students who have done some great academic planning and have figured out a way to go maybe back-to-back or multiple terms. We want you to have at least 88 quarter units at least by the time of departure. So if you're going up during your junior year, obviously you don't have those units amassed yet, but we expect you to have that except for the summer. So if you are already a junior, hopefully you have hit that, and that's one thing you can check off your box. Declared major is another eligibility requirement, and this one can sometimes trip students up. Again, if you're applying as a sophomore, the university says, hey, you don't actually need to be declared until the end of your sophomore year. We speed that process up a little bit, and we ask you to be declared by the time you apply. So you need to get declared basically now. What we effectively will do is once we have your application, we're going to look at your transcript, and we want to make sure that your program plan on there is set in place so that we can clearly see how your study abroad plan works with your declared major. So if you are struggling with that or you have concerns about that, that's a good thing to come in and talk to our office about. But definitely something that I encourage most students to do right away, because it's easily something that you can forget about. And I have seen students denied study abroad for the simple fact that they just didn't get around to doing their major declaration on time, and that's kind of heartbreaking. You have to be in have to at least carry a 2.75 minimum GPA. So it's cumulative. So not just your term, not just within your major, that's cumulative. Again, some programs you will see will vary, that will go up to 3.0 or higher sometimes. So you have to make sure you meet your individual program's GPA, but again, this is the bare minimum. And we want you to be in good standing, so you can't be on any kind of academic or disciplinary probation. Study abroad in general is a competitive program. This year we are changing things a little bit, where we have placed caps on programs at 30 students. And the reason behind a lot of that is that in hearing from students who have returned on very popular programs, most students are a little dismayed at the fact that it felt very much to them like Santa Clara, but abroad. And so we're hoping to make sure that students are diversifying themselves and really giving themselves an opportunity to engage with local communities, rather than just kind of seeing all of the familiar faces that they normally do here at Santa Clara abroad. So there are certain programs that will be affected by that cap, FIE probably being one of them. Our Milan program and Barcelona program continually are popular choices for students. So if you think you're interested in one of those programs, I don't want to discourage you from applying, but again, that's another good thing to maybe come in and talk to us about, so that we can come up with the best strategy to make your application as effective as possible. So we also encourage students to not just use our office, which is the Global Engagement Office, in preparing their application and making sure they meet all of the eligibility criteria, but also checking in with their academic advisors along the way, and using the Hub Writing Center to really strengthen applications, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But all of these resources are there for you to make sure you meet those general eligibility requirements. Any questions about those? Okay, so types of programs. So like I said, there are many different types of programs, and students aren't always sure what they're applying for, or they don't realize what they're applying for. And then when they get abroad, their study abroad experience looks very different than what they thought it would be or what they imagined it would be. And so it's important, I think, to outline what the different programs look like in general, so that when you're picking programs, you can kind of say, okay, this is what this type of program is, here's what I can basically expect. So the first one is what we call a direct enrollment at a local university. And so this is something that involves you taking classes and sitting in classes alongside local students, just as you would here in Santa Clara. Okay, so you have access to almost every sort of department on campus. You can choose maybe some classes from your major, then you can take, you know, another class in an outside department and kind of make your schedule like that. It's not a specialized program per se. Classes are usually in the local language, or maybe they do have some English class choices if it's in a non-English speaking country, so it's just dependent. This is an interesting choice, and I think a good choice for students who, you know, are looking to satisfy, you know, double major, major minor core requirements that really span very different areas of study. So not specialized programs that are just focused on finance or business or something like that. This again involves you really being ready and able and willing and interested in engaging with the local students. You're going to have great opportunities to meet local students and make friends with them in that country because again, you're taking classes with them. I'm going to skip the center-based class program, so and let Tyler maybe talk a little bit about that because that's one that FIE falls under. And the small research-intensive programs are designed for the student who really wants to do some intensive research. It's exactly what it sounds like. In particular, you'll see these programs are called SIT programs, or some of our most popular ones. They're not the only ones. And they allow you to go abroad and really get in sort of in deep with the community, with the local surroundings, to work on a research project or a research paper. And so that is kind of your focus. It's not necessarily a wide breadth of classes. It's not necessarily learning sort of the local academic structure. It's there to learn something and work on something very specific. So often you'll find that you're, you know, going on field trips or site visits to certain areas to do research with the locals and then write your paper. And so it's a very different experience, but a lot of times it allows students to really dig deep in that culture or that environment that they're in, that reflects what they're interested in studying. And they can bring that research paper back and a lot of times add on to that as part of their thesis or further graduate work. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to let you jump in and maybe talk about how FIE fits into the center-based class model.
Yeah, so the center-based classes are basically, the FIE has their own building, we'll just do that as an example, and they basically bring in professors from around like the area and bring them in, and you go to that building for your classes. And you're in class with either other Santa Clara students or other students from different universities who are also studying abroad through that program as well. And it's different because I actually learned this last Study Abroad 101, which I had no idea. Somebody did the first one, the direct enrollment, and he was in a university in somewhere in the UK, I can't remember where it was. And he said, like, you don't call professors, and like the grading system is totally different. But I had no idea because the professors that they bring in, they know that you're American students, so they kind of tailor how they teach you, and the grading system is typically the same as it would be here, and as well as the students are all American students as well. But it's really cool because you can also take classes that are focused on like in the area. So for example, for me, I took British life and cultures and British life in media. So I learned, you know, the local way of doing certain things, and we took a lot of field trips as well. So it's similar to here in terms of classes, but the content is a lot different. And the other thing is often internship options. So yeah, FAE does have an internship option, or I think you have to do it for FAE.
Not all of them, but yeah,
most people do.
popular, yeah.
So the first 7 weeks are mainly focused on classes. Some classes are different, but most classes are during the first 7 weeks, and then you have a 1 week break, and then the last 7 weeks are mostly focused on the internship. You might still have 1 or 2 classes going on during that. So that's kind of the whole program in a nutshell.
So these programs are a little bit more specialized because they're run through an organization that is designed solely to create this type of experience for American students. You will get more opportunities to do things like internships, to do more focused coursework. But on the flip side, you'll also be with American students for the most part. You'll have to maybe work a little bit harder to integrate and make sort of connections and friends outside of that circle. And so there's always a trade-off with all of these programs, and so it's important as you're thinking about what you think is going to fit you best. Also thinking about, what do you imagine your study abroad experience to be like, and make sure that you're kind of in line with what you're choosing. Yes?
If you're having internships with this, is that like, do you get that through the program, or do you apply to that separately, or like, does that explain?
Sure, yeah. So in these programs in particular, like FIE, it's part of your program. So if you selected the internship option, they're going to be working with you sort of to help set you up with an internship that they feel is a good fit. So you'll be giving them information about what you are interested in, what your focus is, what your major is, and then they have a list of kind of pre-vetted organizations, companies that they have worked with in the past that they will then help facilitate students setting up internships. You may still need to do some type of interview, whether that's in person or Skype or something like that, but they are going to be facilitating that for you. It's not like you're just off on your own finding it sort of with no help or assistance, because again, it's an integrated part of your program. It's a credited class, all of that stuff. In other options where maybe internships you're able to do them, based on maybe your student visa or something like that, but it's much more kind of open and it's on you to sort that out, then that would be more on you to kind of go through that steps of the process. But in these programs where it's an integrated part, someone will be helping you. Okay. Okay, so we don't really need to talk about first and second year programs since that doesn't apply to anybody in the room. So we'll skip ahead to why. So most students are thinking, why not study abroad, right? It sounds amazing, hopefully. Maybe you've had friends, family that have gone before you that have studied abroad. Maybe it's just something you've always wanted to do. So, most students don't necessarily need convincing to study abroad, but I think it's important to pull out specific reasons why it makes a lot of sense at Santa Clara, and why Santa Clara functions a little bit different, I think, for students who study abroad in a good way. Oftentimes, especially if you or friends are on the fence about, I know I want to study abroad, but I just don't know if I can or if I should. There's a lot of myths that go on around studying abroad, that in terms of finances or academics that hopefully we can clear up. So the first one is that, studying abroad is really going to throw you off of your planned courses. You're going to graduate late, something like that. And that is definitely not the case. Our programs and what we hopefully are pushing students to do is to really pick programs that allow you to complete major, minor, and core requirements while you are abroad, in order to keep you on track. So this should not necessarily put you off track with the right amount of planning, okay? These credits count towards your overall time to degree. So even if you're taking a class, let's say that's a culture class like we require of students while they're abroad, if you're taking a culture class and it doesn't really fit with your engineering major, that's okay, because those credits are still going towards your Santa Clara credits. They're not considered transfer credits, which is important. They also count towards your GPA. So if you're earning an A abroad, it's like you're earning an A here, and that's factored into your GPA. So that's great too for students to keep in mind. The other thing is that students sometimes worry about the cost of study abroad. And it's important to know that Santa Clara allows you to apply your financial aid that you receive here on campus to your abroad program. And so that can look very different for lots of students, but financial aid can go with you and does go with you on the Santa Clara approved programs. We also have a lot of additional scholarships that are available too that we'll talk about as well. So hopefully, those are just added reasons to want to study abroad. If you need more convincing, we do have some of these great engagement reports that are written by our returnees who talk a lot about their sort of journey to study abroad and what it was like. And a lot of them touch on some of these concerns that they had going abroad and what that looked like for them. And we can talk a little bit more about that in the returnee section. But it's important to remember that other students have found lots of these reasons to study abroad too. Okay, so academics. The academics going abroad is something that we focus really, really heavily on. And so for many of you, if you're just starting the research process now, this is where we want you to start. And there's a couple of different ways to access our programs. There's through the major advising guides and then the program search tool. Which one did you use, Tyler? Do you remember how you?
I don't remember ever seeing the program search tool.
Okay.
So
You went to the major advising
probably
guide?
that one.
Awesome. Yeah, so the major advising guide, or what we fondly call MAPS, is where students will often go. When you click on our website, it says find a program by major. And these are a great starting point for you because they will show you, based on what we've worked out with your department, when it makes the best sense for you to go within that major, as well as what featured programs are recommended. And what we mean by featured programs is that these are programs that highlight at least 3 courses within your major so that you have a viable amount of choice for your field of study while you're abroad on that program. It doesn't necessarily mean those are the only programs that you can go on. So if you do use the major advising guides, just be warned that if you only see 3 programs and you kind of have a moment of panic, like these are the only ones I have to choose from, that's not necessarily the case. Like I said, we've pulled out the ones that have the most course choice, as well as we've kind of just tried to diversify and show some really interesting places and programs on those guides. But the program search tool is where you'll find all of the class choices, or excuse me, all the program choices. And that program database, there's a little video that goes along with it, but it's pretty self-explanatory where there are lots of different drop-down menus that you can use to sort of filter in and out of your search. So most students are probably going to search by when they want to go. Some will search by where. If you don't know where, or if you're open to keeping yourself flexible, which I encourage you to do, then the other one you could search by, of course, is major. Some students will also search by, price level. If they really want to take classes with locals or have an internship, you can really play around with the database. So if you're having trouble using the advising guides to find something that matches what your interests and your goals are, then the program database is something that you can use. And that's something that if you can't find it, or it's really kind of giving you some trouble, that's a good thing to come in and we can walk you through in advising as well. Okay, so finding equivalent courses. Did you use the equivalency database at all?
I think so, yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how that works? Do you remember? It's probably been a while.
Yeah, I don't really remember how it works.
So the equivalency database is our database of classes that have been approved in the past for students. And there are tons of them in there. And they're based on their major, their minor, their core. And this is sometimes helpful for students when looking at the courses on their program to see if they've been previously approved by your department to count as an upper division elective or a particular major requirement. And this is really nice to have because it gives you a lot of information to help fill out your application and know that ahead of time these classes are going to count when I come back here on campus for this particular requirement. Oftentimes when students are using the equivalency database, they might have another moment of panic where they don't see any classes approved for their particular program or their major. And they think, okay, now I can't go on this program. That's not necessarily the case at all. This is really designed to be based on what students have previously requested. So it doesn't mean that you can't, it just means no one's requested it yet. So then that's on you to then request it from your department chair. And there's a process that we have, even including a template and email and step-by-step to really make it easy for you to request course equivalencies, whether for your major or your minor, or even for core. And so this is something that students will do, usually I think is best to do as you're doing the application so that you know when you're applying, you have a solid base of classes to propose within your application. At the very least, students should hopefully be doing it before they go, but some students are still looking at this when they're abroad. I usually tell students, cast your net really wide. If the program is requiring you to take 5 classes, have 9 of them approved, have 8 of them approved, so that in the event you get abroad and you realize there's a class conflict or that class isn't offered that quarter or that semester that you're abroad, you have backups. Because just because you find a course equivalent, a course in the course equivalency database does not mean that it's guaranteed to be offered every quarter you go. It's no different than here at Santa Clara where classes will change by quarter, by year, and so that's why it's good to give yourself lots of alternatives. Yes?
So a lot of the programs, I'm guessing, are semesters,
Yes.
right? So like you get a quarter's worth of credit if you go
Correct.
for a semester.
Yes, exactly. So most of the world, most of everywhere, aside from a few universities here, operate on the semester schedule. And so that is true for the majority of the programs on study abroad. So for fall people who are going in the fall, you would be going usually end of August and coming back sort of late December in time to start winter quarter here. So you're only absent from campus for one quarter, but you are earning a semester's worth of quarter credits. It also means you might be taking more classes than you're normally accustomed to, but that's not uncommon, and because it's on a semester schedule, it works a little bit different. So yeah, but that's a good question. Yes?
Wait, so to clarify, are you like returning with more credits than like a fall quarter?
Yes.
And you come back
Yeah. So when you see semester credits, you can multiply them by 1.5 to give yourself the quarter credit equivalent. So you're looking at probably anywhere from 22 to 24 quarter credits. How that works out into requirements will depend on how much each class is worth. Sometimes you'll find some classes on some programs are worth a lot of credit for one class because you're doing a lot of work for that, but maybe you're only taking 4 classes. So you're fulfilling that one requirement, but it looks different in quarters. So yeah, so you'll definitely be helped out on the quarter system. On the flip side, if you're thinking of a spring semester, those are stretched out over winter and spring quarters usually. You're not necessarily behind in credits, but you do want to make sure it's a little bit of extra academic planning to make sure that you're not behind requirement-wise because you only have really one quarter here on Santa Clara campus. Does that make sense? If anyone is interested in spring semester and wants to kind of talk that part about out, let me know. Okay. Do you remember at least if this was easy or not? Do you remember it being super painful?
The course equivalency?
Yeah.
Well, I remember requesting a course, like getting one approved was a little tricky.
When did you start? Do you remember having to do that? Or when you did it?
Yeah, I think it was just, during the application process or whatever.
Yeah. Chairs get a lot of requests for these, so I think the benefit of doing it now maybe than waiting for when you're in the throes of applications is that you're ahead of the crowd and they'll probably have a little bit more time to spend on this and can respond back to you faster. You don't want to leave these requests at the last minute. Okay, so what do we mean exactly by finding a program with a strong fit? When I was talking about the fact that the study abroad application is competitive, one of the biggest things that we're using as a deciding factor is making sure that students have not just picked a program because they've always wanted to go to Italy because it's pretty and they like fashion. You have to go beyond that. There's nothing wrong with having an interest in Italy or the fashion industry, but you have to make a compelling academic case for why you're choosing this program rather than any other program that you could find. And so you're going to be building out your academic program. And it's going to look hopefully something like this. I mentioned something about a content course or a culture course that's required of all students. We require students who are going on a non-English speaking program to take a language course. That could be a beginning class if you've never touched the language before in your life. It could be an advanced language class if you're there to do intensive language. It just depends on your language ability. If you're going to an English-speaking location, then you'll be taking a culture class. So what was yours on FIA called again?
British Life and Cultures.
Okay, yeah. So a culture class is something to give you a general sense of what the culture, what the community, what the country is like that you're living in. So maybe that's their history class, maybe it's a culture class, something like that. And then ideally, yes?
So is a culture class, what does that fulfill for Santa Clara's requirements?
It depends. It could be potentially nothing. It's a study abroad requirement, so it fulfills that. In some cases, depending on the class that you find, it could maybe be a core class, or if you are a history major or something like that, maybe it is in line with what your major requirements are. It just depends on the students. But yeah, it's not, if it doesn't fulfill a major requirement, at least from our perspective, that's not a bad thing. And as we said before, every class you take abroad is still earning you credits and grades, so it's not totally a waste per se. We don't want you to think about it like that. It's definitely a study abroad requirement. And then students hopefully are focusing the majority of their classes on major or minor or core. So when you fill out your academic planning form as part of your application, we are going to be asking you to put together this outline. We're going to be asking you to show us what you're taking before, during, and then after study abroad, so that again we get a very clear picture of how this works with your academics. So again, options for academics, again, major classes, minor classes. If any of you have double majors, you know, double dipping and finding classes in both majors is a great way to diversify what you're taking. Minor classes, those of you who have minors or have been thinking about picking up one, sometimes students will use study abroad as an opportunity to kind of do some work on a minor, especially if it's, you know, really relates to the country that they're going to or something like that. So if you were thinking about doing a minor, consider maybe trying to do it on study abroad or doing some requirements for it if you're allowed to. And then core courses. Some core courses are not allowed on study abroad. These are the approved core classes that you can look for. If you find a class that you think is going to work for a core, you want to make sure that you have a good sense of what the core requirement is. Oftentimes students are looking at, let's say for example, their studio art class. You have to create art, obviously in studio art, to meet that requirement. And oftentimes students are finding maybe art history classes abroad, so that's clearly not a great fit for that core requirement. So if you're interested in doing core, you know, be sure you're looking at the requirements for that class before you get it reviewed. Okay, so as I said, some majors, minors, core have restrictions on them. Certain departments will maybe restrict the number of courses that you can take abroad. So you want to know that probably going into your selection process of your program, because you want to know planning-wise if your program or if your major only allows you to take one class, you know, what is that going to look like for what you're taking before, during, and after? Maybe you choose then to focus instead more heavily on your second major or your minor or something like that. In particular, we want to just call out again, because this trips up students a lot, is your RTC 3 has to be completed here on campus. So that one's not negotiable. And the core diversity is unlikely to be fulfilled abroad because it requires a U.S. perspective. So students ask about those all the time, so we wanted to make sure that that was clear. But check with your majors. You said you were communications. You want to talk about the restrictions for comm? Do you know what they were?
Well, I think there's only two comm classes. Yeah. So basically, yeah, I just took 2 comm classes, and then I have an entrepreneurial minor as well. So I also took, that's the class I had to get approved, was marketing 181. So.
Okay. Any questions before we move on from the academics? Okay. Okay, so study abroad, what does it cost? This is the other big myth that we're talking about, and that study abroad is, you know, completely inaccessible for, you know, from a financial standpoint. And we really believe and hope that, you know, we have enough offerings for students that if you can afford at least to be here at Santa Clara, you can afford to be abroad. And you can see there are a wide range of different levels of costs, okay? So for students, it's very, very important at the get-go to know and be familiar with what your program costs. Because the last thing you want to do is have your heart set on a level F program, get approved for it, get nominated and everything, only to realize later that you really just can't swing this, or your parents are like, no, that's not going to happen in a million years, because that leaves you stranded kind of without a second choice. Study abroad cost levels are built on a few things. So tuition, whatever the basic tuition is for the campus for that year. These are our costs right now that we're going on for 2017-18. Then the next column that we add on to are housing and program fees that are set by the Board of Trustees. So they look at the programs, they look at what is involved in the programs, what kind of services and things that the program abroad provides you. So if they provide internship services, if they provide on-site support, if they provide insurance, housing, sort of food package meals. Some programs do, some programs don't. If there are built-in field trips, things like that, they will look at all of those things and set a program fee. And then that, in addition to the tuition, is what you get for the cost of the program, okay? So it just, again, depends. Most of our programs, like this year, are shaking out to be in the level B area, so that's kind of not the cheapest, not the most expensive, so I think students are going to hopefully have a lot of choice within that area. Level A, we haven't really talked about as much, but those are our exchange programs. So has anyone met an exchange student here on campus yet? Come across one? We have a few floating around. You have? Awesome. So these students are coming from universities that we have partnerships with, where you are basically going and taking classes almost like in their place, and they're coming here in your place, so it's an exchange. They are paying their tuition abroad, you are paying your tuition here, and then when you go abroad, the only thing you're responsible for is sort of room and board. So for students who are particularly financially savvy, exchange programs can be great because again, it's your basic tuition and then your room and board is up to you, so students can get pretty savvy that way. So if you're interested in exchange, definitely talk to me. I'm the exchange coordinator, so we can look at those options too. But these are the cost levels, yes.
So do these like do you still have to pay for like your room and board here? Say like if you're living on campus?
No. So you don't pay to hold a space or anything like that. Yeah. So most students, if they're living off campus, will find ways to sublease. If you are living on campus, they'll prorate. You'll go ahead and apply for housing just like you normally would, and then housing receives information about all of our nominated students, so they'll then know to prorate or work with you on different application deadlines. Do you remember what you did for housing?
Yeah, I just applied for the housing application like normal, and then they just put me in the spot.
When you came back. Okay, yeah. Okay, so important to know, these prices don't include obviously out-of-pocket expenses such as flights, visas if required, passports if you don't have them yet, those kind of things. We do work with students to kind of budget out what they can expect as part of those costs, so you can kind of get a rounder figure, if you will. But these will give you at least the program costs. And this information, if this is something that your family or your parents want right now, and I don't blame them if they do, you can find this on our website. You can, when you're looking at the database, you can find the cost level. So I've gotten a number of calls from parents this time around who were very surprised when they saw the fee for their study abroad program. So be nice to your families and give them this information beforehand, because it helps alleviate a lot of confusion and stress for students. If finances is still something that's kind of on the forefront of your mind, we're actually going to have a workshop this year to kind of break down a little bit more about how finances work, and financially will be there too, so I'll let you know about that. Questions about cost? Okay. Okay, so as I said, financial aid applies to your time abroad, so which is great, especially if you're on maybe one of those lower cost programs and your financial aid covers the majority of your tuition, then you have a very small program fee that you're looking at, which isn't too bad. We also really try and encourage scholarship as much as possible. This year we had a record amount of scholarships that were awarded to students. It was over $110,000. So that's an additional money to financial aid, so that's really, really great. Some of our partner scholarships are provided just by applying. You don't even need to do anything separate, FIE being one of those that give extra money to our Santa Clara students to help them with the cost of programs. We also have our own Santa Clara Fund scholarships, which is money from alumni that they donate to students who are going abroad. And then there's also national scholarships. If anyone is a financial aid recipient and they receive the Pell Grant, The Gilman Award is a really, really prominent and prestigious award that gives up to $5,000 for a study abroad program. So that can be fairly significant for students. So if you're thinking that scholarship is something that you really want to tap into, then definitely let us know too. Did you do any scholarships, Tyler? Yeah. Questions about scholarships? Okay, so connect with a returned student. You're part of the Bronco Abroad Ambassadors, right? Have you joined?
I have no, I can't remember.
You come to all. You're just an ambassador. It's fine. Yeah. So the Bronco Abroad Ambassadors specifically is our program that allows students who have returned to participate with the office to come to events to talk about their experience. And so they are often available. They'll do peer advising. They'll do reach out and talk with you via email. You'll see them do lots of different panels to talk about their experience abroad. So again, as you're going through the database, if you come across the program, you say, okay, I'm really interested in FIE. I want to talk to somebody who's been on that program. What we ask students to do is send us an email of what you would like forwarded to that returnee. And so usually it helps if you have very specific questions because it helps them better tailor their advice to you. So if you have questions about what was the housing like, was it really far from where I had to go? What was transportation like? What were the professors like? What were the classes like? Were they really big? Were they really small? Rather than just, hey, tell me about your experience. It helps. And so then you can forward that to us and we'll forward it to our returnee that we have for that program and they'll connect with you. So a lot of times they can talk via email. Sometimes, you guys meet for coffee and chat about your program, on campus. And it's a great, like I said, opportunity to get sort of the student perspective. Did you remember talking to any returnees before you made your choice? So now they can all just talk to you. We also have global engagement reports, like I mentioned. So these are really detailed, thorough reports of students' experience through the process. And they really are interesting because they dig into a lot more than just beyond what was housing like, what was school like. It was kind of what their experience was like, what was diversity like while they were abroad, what were challenges that they faced. And the good, the bad, and the ugly in these reports. So I definitely encourage you to read these online. If you're having trouble sourcing them or finding them, you can always shoot us an email and we can link you to them. And again, always reach out to our office and we can connect you. Okay, so let's get into the application process. So how far, has anyone started looking at the database? Yeah? Just at the very beginning. Okay, good. So you're not behind or anything, but as I'm sure Tyler can attest to, the application process is not something you want to start overnight. Do you remember when you started?
I don't remember when I started, but yeah, I remember it being
long. Yes. So the application process is definitely thorough. Right now you're in the research process, and as you can see, there's a lot that goes into the research process beyond closing your eyes and picking a country. You're going to be doing that research with the course equivalencies, with your major advisor, all of that stuff. Okay, maybe you're talking to a returnee, you're building out that whole academic plan to make sure that the program is even a good fit. Once you get through the application process, though, you are hopefully nominated by us. Like I said, in the spirit of full disclosure, this is a competitive process, and we say that a lot so that students are really aware of what that means. We do our best to, from a budget standpoint, get as many of you abroad as we possibly can. But there are some instances where students are not able to be nominated by Santa Clara, in large part because they didn't meet those basic eligibility requirements that we talked about, or maybe they didn't start their application process as early as you guys are and tried to put it together the night before, and it just clearly was not a good fit for them. So hopefully you get past that process, you're nominated, and then you also confirm, okay? So we ask students to say, yes, I'm still really sure that I'm going on this program. So sometimes students change their minds. Sometimes they applied, but they just still weren't sure, and then their plans changed, and they ultimately don't go on study abroad. That's okay, but once you confirm, we kind of assume that you are going forward, because your next step is to do the program application for the program that you're going on. So do you want to talk a little bit about how there's a separate application kind of after You did the FIU one, correct?
Yeah. There's not really a lot to say about that one.
So there's a digital deadline, right? And
yeah, I
there's-
just remember there was like a lot with like doing the whole like visa process in the passport. That's like way down the line, but that's something that also takes a while. So it's like basically every step that you have, just make sure you prepare for it because most of them will take some time to do. So just just don't delay starting anything.
Exactly. Yes. So sometimes students confirm with us and say, "Yay, we're going on study abroad," and then completely just kind of drop off the radar without realizing that for many programs there's a second application where they ask you to maybe provide additional transcripts. Maybe they're wanting to get you getting started on the visa process, and there's deadlines that are involved with that. This second application, for the most part, is something that is required, but it doesn't necessarily hinge on whether you are going to be accepted on the program. Most programs, if you've been nominated by Santa Clara, you meet the deadlines and complete their application as required, you're going to be selected into their program. There's only a few that it's still competitive in the second round. Yes.
So I know for the Santa Clara application, you have to like do a bunch of essays and things
Right.
like that. So for the program application, do they have similar questions, or will we be writing like possibly more essays for that?
Maybe. So it varies. Some will be very specific and straightforward and maybe just want basic details, transcript, that kind of stuff. Others will want you to do a little bit more essay work. And so the program doesn't read your Santa Clara application. So if you want to take what you've written and maybe tweak it a little bit, I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. So if they are asking similar questions and you feel really strongly about your answer, then sure, you could definitely use that. So, but yes, you're right. We will ask you more of those questions. Other programs in the second round may or may not. Do you remember having essay questions? Okay. And so then hopefully you're accepted by the program. Yay! Questions about the application process? Yes?
Can you go over deadlines?
Yes, we'll get to that for sure. Yeah, that's important. So spoiler alert, the application deadline is December 15th, but we'll talk a little bit more in depth about what that means. But yeah, December 15th is what you're working towards. So we have a really unique selection process and nomination process here on campus that involves a committee of people reading your application. So everyone's application is read 2 times. One by someone from the study abroad team, and then another individual from across campus, who most likely is not going to be someone in your department or anything like that. It's going to be someone maybe from another administrative office, maybe from another department, that is reading your application and making sure that, again, you've selected a good program for yourself. And the point of that is to really make sure that, we're really nominating students on a very thorough, detailed basis, and that based on 2 people reading your application, it's very clear to them why you chose this program and how it works for you. And so we provide a rubric and selection process for our committee members, and we actually provide it to you. This is not a secret. This is something we post on our website. And if you come in and talk to us in advising, we will show you where this is. And why this is great is it's essentially a cheat sheet. We've given you the sort of guidelines that we want you to follow and what we anticipate making a high scoring application. So as you're making your application, you're writing your essay questions, your academic essay, use this rubric to make sure, am I hitting these high points in the 4 score, 4 being the highest. This rubric, for those of you who do have friends who have done this previously, looks a little bit different. Our application questions look a little bit different. So you don't necessarily want to look at their old one that they're like, hey, here, I found this, you can have it. Because it does look a little bit different this year. So pull off of our website. Again, if you have trouble finding it, you can ask us. But this, again, is going to show you how each reader is going to look at your application. And it's important so you know that, again, these people are not necessarily, I'm not an engineering major, right? I have no clue about engineering. But I want it to be obvious in when I'm reading this why you as an engineering major or business major or comm major chose this program. Okay, so someone from the financial aid office or the athletics office who volunteered to be on our committee, again, also doesn't know anything about engineering per se, but it will be very obvious to them based on this rubric why you should be selected for that program. Do you remember using the rubric when you were writing your application?
I might have.
A little bit? Okay. So deadlines. So like I said, December 15th is the deadline, and it's a big deadline. This year, what we've done is we have taken the fall, winter, and spring program deadlines and made them into one. So before, we would have one in the beginning of the year in fall for fall programs, and then we would have the winter, spring deadline at a later time. We've smooshed them together, and this is hopefully going to be a good thing. If you are someone who is interested in winter or spring, it means that you have to plan a little bit further in advance than you thought. But hopefully this is a benefit to all students because it allows us to see the very beginning of the year who's interested in studying abroad, so that when we are making our nomination process, we have the full list of students. So from a budget perspective, we can hopefully send more students than we would have normally. Does that make sense? So for most of you, if you're thinking about going abroad in the fall, this doesn't really change for you too much because this would have been when you were applying anyway. But if you're thinking winter, spring, or if you have friends that are mentioning winter, spring, make sure they know this deadline has been moved up. Summer, if anyone's interested in summer, that has remained largely the same. So January 15th is when we anticipate deadlines, or the deadline will be. It doesn't matter if your application is ready and done and dusted and submitted on November 1st. It's not a rolling application process. It has to be in there by December 15th. It also doesn't matter if you submit it on December 14th. We're not going to know, and it's not going to like be, oh my gosh, you didn't do it until like you were submitted until the night before. Yes.
What? Sorry.
That's okay.
No, just kidding.
Awesome.
I'll raise it.
You can always circle back around if you think about it. Okay, so my suggestion to you is to get started, like I said, today, especially with those course requests, as well as sign forms from your major advisor. Those things are ultimately always the thing that trips students up and having an application be delayed. And these deadlines are by and large not negotiable and not extendable. Yes?
I remembered.
Yes.
When do you hear back about studying abroad?
So that's a good question. So this year we anticipate letting students know by, it's usually February 15th, both for the fall, winter, spring, as well as the summer. So that's the other thing. Yeah, I know students are going to be really anxious, but as you can see, it's a pretty complicated review process, right? So, if you submitted your application, even if you submitted on November 1st, again, we're not going to be letting students know before that date. Are any of you marketing majors? Okay, so marketing in particular, you're going to be able to have your academic planning form signed the 13th and the 14th. So definitely use that as kind of your deadline to have that done. Okay, so here are some of the things and resources that we have available for you if you want more information. So the big one is our fair that's coming up. So this is a really great opportunity if you're interested in maybe FIE and a CIE program. You can come to this fair and talk to representatives from that organization, from that company. And so they can give you, again, more details about their program specifically. And I think it's important for students because, a lot of times students come to the fair thinking that they really want to do this particular program, and after talking with them, find that it really just doesn't fit their needs like they thought, but they actually find another program that's much better. So it's a great opportunity to have a one-on-one with people before doing their application. So I've been telling students, kind of use October 10th as your initial deadline to have maybe 2 or 3 programs narrowed down so that you know going into the fair, who do I want to talk to, how do I want to make this work for me. Our drop-in advising, we're available 4 days out of the week, Mondays from 10 to noon, same with Tuesdays, and then Wednesday, Thursdays, 2 to 4. If anyone cannot make these due to class or work, just shoot us an email and we will work with you. Yes?
So those are just like more specific questions that you can get?
Yeah, so let's say you're having problems finding something that I refer to, or you want to talk more about a program, or you zoned out for this entire thing and you want to talk a little bit more about it, that's okay. You can come to the drop-ins. All right, so study abroad fair, drop-in advising. The finance workshop, and which I refer to, which I think we have an event slide. If not, we have.
I'm gonna follow up with you guys and send you an email with the events list as well.
Awesome. Problem solved. Talk to your families. Study abroad is often a family decision for a variety of different reasons. And so don't make, if you think this decision is important to you, don't make it in a bubble. A lot of times students like to use the upcoming holidays to sit down and talk with their families, but don't leave them out of the loop. Meet with your major advisor and then select a program, complete an application, just like that.
If you guys have any questions